close to my school, hence my parents were happy about the safety measures. Both of my parents traveled a lot, so I got accustomed to staying alone in the house from quite a young age. We had tight securities and alarms all around this new house too. There was no way anyone could break in without setting off the alarm, so I had nothing to worry about. At the back of the house there stood an old 3-story apartment. I would always see people on the first and second floor, but the third floor it felt like no one stayed there. The third story's bedroom windows faced directly at the backside of our house. It was a calm and quiet place, so I kinda liked chilling in my house while my parents were on tour. One weekend, my parents were off to visit my sick aunt in LA. I stayed back home like usual. It was a Saturday night, and all my friends wanted to hang out at one of my other friends' house. I promised my parents not to stay out late, so after a couple of beers I came back home. It was 9 p.m., and I wasn't feeling sleepy at all. I went upstairs and got in my bathing suit to go for a swim in the pool. It was a hot summer night. I poured myself a glass of fresh orange juice and put on some music. I swam for some time, and then I drank my juice lying on my pool raft. I must have fallen asleep. I heard a noise and I woke up. The backside of the apartment was all empty. No one was around. Just then, my eyes went to the third floor window of the nearby building. A frail old woman was standing in front of the window looking directly at me. Her eyes were so big that her stare kind of freaked me out. I didn't say anything and looked at my watch. It was around 10 p.m. I just continued to lie on my raft, thinking she would leave on her own. After a couple of minutes, when I looked back, she wasn't there on the window. I felt relieved and kept thinking how come I never saw her before. I almost thought that no one lived on the third floor apartment. That's when I heard my phone ringing. It was inside the house, so I got up out of the pool thinking it was my parents calling. I was just about to step inside when I heard a voice coming from behind me. I froze. It was an old woman's voice. I slowly turned back and my heart drowned in horror. That old, creepy woman was standing right behind me. There was no way she could have gotten in my backyard without breaking in. Her wide, cold death stare made my legs numb. I literally couldn't walk away, even though I wanted to so badly. I spoke in a broken voice. "Ma'am, how did you get inside?" She slightly opened her toothless mouth and said, "Isabel, you're still here? Run away now or your husband will come and bury you there." She then lifted her weak, lean hand and pointed towards the tree in our garden with her long, creepy fingers. My blood turned to ice. I replied in a shaky voice, "What are you saying?" She didn't answer. She just kept staring at the tree and then back to my face. Her mouth opened and her eyes widened. It was such a horrible sight. Suddenly, my phone again rang and I ran towards my room frantically this time. I got inside my room and locked it. It was my dad. I answered the phone and stood sobbing terribly. My dad got all freaked out and called 911 on my behalf. The cops came after 10 minutes, and I told them an old crazy lady from the nearby apartment entered our backyard and said some very bizarre things to me. They immediately went to the apartment building and asked the landlord about his tenants on the third floor. It came out as a shock when the landlord said that that floor of the apartment had been empty for the last 15 years. But he also said that an old lady used to live on that floor way back in the day. She was sick and bedridden, so she spent most of her time sitting near that window inside the dark room, and that her children left her alone during her last days. And she even died sitting near that window. The landlord himself did her cremation rituals. The next morning, when my parents came, I told them everything, and a lady cop also stood back with me in the house from last night. She also explained to my parents that I might have just had a bad dream or something, but while they were talking, something popped into my mind. I asked my dad what was the name of the previous owner of our house. He replied, saying the bank told him a woman lived here with her husband in the house before we moved in. But he also added that that was 15 years ago, and he asked why I was asking. My heart started to beat faster. I told the cop that the old woman addressed me as Isabel, and said her husband buried her under that tree. They both looked pretty surprised, and the cop even decided to check our backyard. When they dug under the tree, scaring the hell out of everyone, a skeleton of a full-grown woman got discovered from our garden. It had a ring on its left hand. Me, along with my mom and my dad, were all completely paranoid. We never knew that there was a dead body lying in our garden. The cops investigated this matter, and they came to know that indeed it was a woman named Isabel's remains. Her husband filed a missing persons report, but after filing the report, he too left the house and the town. Due to the lack of evidence, the police couldn't find any details about her. Also, no one came to interrogate him about her. Her autopsy report signified that she was murdered by a serious injury made by a blunt object on the back of the head. The cops instantly suspected it was her husband who murdered her and had buried her under that tree. And to this day, they're still searching for her husband. I am almost positive that that old lady saw this entire incident from her room's window, but couldn't tell anyone. Even though people find it hard to believe, I think she came back to tell me about it, and I believe it was her ghost that I saw that night. But the question that kept eating my mind was, why me? But this too got answered when the cops published Isabel's picture in the local newspaper, stating about the gruesome case. My parents are still in deep shock. I have no idea what to say. Isabel looks exactly like me. Or should I say I look exactly like her? We're still living in the same house to this day, but I haven't seen that old lady ever again. This happened to